What up, Naughty Steppers? Connor Whitmore here again with another review for you on the Nawtystep channel, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the new EP from Barely Alive, released on Disciple Records, Multiplayer. Barely Alive are back with their second EP of 2019. A quick follow-up to Lost in Time, which in itself was a pretty quick follow-up to their Odyssey album of last year. Another blistering collection just months after their sophomore LP, affirming them as the machines of modern dubstep. In the time since, they've put out their take on Dodge and Fusky's massive tune Silence is Golden, along with the three-way Mr. Bubs tribute alongside 12th Planet and Phase 1, Dubstep. But now we have Multiplayer, which, in owing to its name, is on the surface an interesting collaborative project, sporting 5 tracks in company with other producers, one of which they've worked with before in Phase 1, the others from notably different dark electronic music backgrounds, the most eye-catching being metallic RIDDIM and trap, some of which on first look I wasn't entirely sure how they would work, but that made me more interested going into it as to how they would turn out, how these different worlds would collide. And so is Multiplayer as interesting and fun as the track listing makes out? I'd say mostly yeah. This EP shows Barely Alive's music to be again not only fantastic in itself, but also as a foundation for musical experimentation, providing a solid base for each collaborator to have their say on their respective tunes. Some of which work and others not, but it proves them once more to be one of the most important acts in dubstep. Now, as ever with Barely Alive, there is a lot going on in this EP, a reflection on their constant willingness to level up their ideas. Evident most with the drops, and again, as per, some are more invigorating than others here. The best of which, in my opinion, the prime example of Multiplayer as a collaborative project being Crankin' with Eliminate. The first drop I originally found too slow, but with more listens I'm enjoying the force of the bellowing BROSTEP quite a bit. And you may be wondering where the Eliminate influence is at that point, but those queries are quelled instantly with the double drop. These vintage, prodding Eliminate notes snaking through your mind, becoming more sinewy and acidic over time, and importantly, laced with classic Barely Alive growls to make it a proper melding of styles, slightly out of place but a seriously good idea. That's before I get to the second main drop, which again sounds like almost entirely Barely Alive, but can't go without being mentioned. Opening with that scattergun delivery, with more beastly dubstep winding this way and that, timing of everything is spot on. And that's the closer, rounding Multiplayer off sweetly, but it also opens in an equally emphatic way. Arsonist alongside Phase 1, with vocals from Virus Syndicate, is one of the best heavy metal dubstep fusions I've heard in a fair while. Best heard in the intro and outro, but the drops keep up that monstrous hype effectively for the most part. The huge fake out in drop 1 works well, the screech is slamming in, the breakfast sample is a bit decent as well, you know. The double drop is a necessary switch up, but doesn't have quite enough going on initially, does pick up the beastliness again though. The bottom line being that it's clear both styles are working together, regardless of the ideas, the blending is there. Track 2, Bloodshed with Murder, I find the least enthralling, a lot of pretty standard, thick, riddim-y production. I find the second halves to each drop quite inventive, the first slowed down and the double drop quickened with those clinking jabs. But the original releases just feel a little bit saturated and bloated and flat on ingenuity and flavour. I could say similar things about the Samplifier collab Can't Hold Back. The drop idea is pretty basic and somewhat stifled compared to others on the EP, but a lot of it does hit pretty hard, shiny, brutal, with enough to take your attention in different directions throughout. Moreover, the final drop, this pounding wall of sound, may be a bit messy, but is an interesting idea for them to have dipped into. And And then we have the middle tune, Weed Ha Ha with Bandles, where for me the collaborative influence is least obvious. At least in the drops, where the skittish riddim production and ravenous growls just sound like classic Barely Alive. Equally so the double drop with all that screechy variety, an expertly done section and one of my favourites on the EP. But of course there is so much else to multiplayer apart from the drops, and I'll start with the introductions, all of which are markedly different. The menacing, threatening introduction to the EP on Arsonist, with Virus Syndicate in full flow, is fantastic. I love how it plays such a big part in the track overall. I touched on it briefly earlier, but that heavy metal outro, layering with those electric notes, is up there with the best I've heard recently. Also, the drums on that tune from start to finish are exceptional. The wailing Critchy Critch cameo on the warped opening of Bloodshed, I'm not really feeling, seems at odds with the instrumental beneath it. The reggae introduction of Weed Ha Ha is perhaps where we feel the Bandles input most, uplifting and bouncy with Rod Aslan's princely vocal. And again, I like how it returns to that vibe for the outro, finishing in a slightly cuter way than it starts. Can't Hold Back follows a dark, brooding opening with a lively rave-inspired breakbeat, out of nowhere but a powerful addition to the EP. And alongside Eliminate, Barely Alive revisit their funky tendencies on Crankin', another breakbeat kind of drop, fusing elements of disco and synthwave. Not brilliantly put together, snares are quite glaring, but it's definitely feel good and welcomed at that point. I also wanted to touch on the amount of fake drops on multiplayer, a good 5 of which on the EP are so. Which is great in itself, I appreciate the varied approach, but I definitely feel the Barely Alive sound is more effective when it slams in ASAP. Which is why I think I enjoy Crankin' so much. I mean, the two main drops there are no fucking around, making their presence felt right away. There are also distinct moments where the sound is notably harsher, scratchier, a little less pleasant on the ear. Funnily enough, on the collaborations with Murder and Samplifier, the two heavily metallic, industrial riddim features on the EP. Taking nothing away from that style of music, that's what it's all about, but I'm not sure it blends with the clean, refined Barely Alive sound all that well. But all in all, even though on the surface multiplayer is just a one-off and a bit of collaborative fun, the bottom line is it's another absolutely huge EP from Barely Alive with an incredible amount going on. All the while the duo showing how ridiculously high their standard is once again, but also how adaptable their sound is. 5 tunes with very clear style combinations, some more so than others, but I'm not sure that even matters. Because every tune fundamentally has the Barely Alive bass with little bits from the other producers on top. It is a Barely Alive EP after all. One where the ideas aren't always top notch, but are always a sign of pushing boundaries and taking the sound to the next level. Where the variety in not only style but structure is on point, starting with 2 short cuts and finishing with 3 extensive ones. Yet to mention this, but every build is super clean and well put together, the vocal samples are all well suited to their respective songs. But the adventure and flavour of multiplayer is what it's all about, and I come out of listening to it feeling like more musicians should try this collaborative thing. We had Virtual Riot with his Chemistry EP from a few years ago, couple other examples here and there, but it's a great idea and I think it should be done more. A reflection on what makes dubstep music so fantastic in how it can adapt, taking inspiration from any kind of source. Which multiplayer is a fantastic example of. It may not be perfect, but I would say that it's very good on the whole. Which is mad considering how many different producers are involved. The chance for things to go wrong are much higher than the opposite. But it's a sign of how good Barely Alive have become that they can churn out another project like this, different to the norm, and have it excel in so many ways. Collabs that we're also unlikely to see ever again, which makes it more special. So overall, multiplayer, it's one to treasure. Now in terms of my favourite on the EP, then I think I would have to go with Crankin'. Best mix of melodies and drops, most complete and interesting, and the best representation of this EP as a collaborative project in my opinion. And in terms of recommendations, if you enjoyed the EP, it's quite Barely Alive centric, so I would look at past stuff from them, and depending on which track you enjoyed most, I would explore that particular collaborator. And also Chemistry by Virtual Riot, another collaborative EP. And so there we have it, my thoughts on the new Barely Alive EP multiplayer released on Disciple Records. What did you guys make of this EP? Do you have a favourite track from the 5? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, then be sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell along the way. Social media accounts in the description box down below. For some other Disciple related videos on the channel, check out the link right here. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know guys, so be sure as always to keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see all of you legends in the next one. Peace out.